Hello everyone. Here we are discussing the paper titled Access to Justice in a Globalized Economy, Some Reflections. This paper is written by a renowned legal scholar, Upendra Baxi sir, and this was presented in 2006 at the Golden Jubilee celebration of the Indian Law Institute, situated in Delhi. So this paper becomes relevant for studying the globalized economy in the subject called Law and Justice in Globalizing World. So, the main theme of this paper was to bring the issues which are there when we are talking about the concept of equity and equality in the times of globalized economy. So, he's addressing the issue that how in a globalized economy we are going to address the issue of equity and equality. So, on the prima facie, he says that the theme of the conference itself is puzzling and contradictory because he says that equity and equality cannot be brought together with the rule of capital, which is the case of market economy. So he says that the equity and equality are run by the rule of law. So for bringing equity and equality, we need rule of law, whereas a market economy requires rule by capital, not by rule of law. So market economy will always see the commercial interest, and the rule and the equity and equality will always see the rule of law. So these two things are different, and it is very difficult, according to him, to bring them together. So he says that this globalization is a new form of colonization. And in fact, he says that it is almost invisible. Earlier globalization was at least visible. This is the same globalization, but it is invisible. So we are not able to see that how the Western industries, the multinational corporations are taking over the third world market, like the Indian market and other developing or underdeveloped countries. Next, he says that this creates the complexity of new globalizing middle class. So this new globalizing middle class thinks that the concept of globalized economy is good, but he said that it is problem for this for those only who think that it is good. Now, in this paper, the main argument is regarding the judicial system, that how judicial system gets submerged in a globalized economy. So to make his argument and to substantiate his argument, he takes six stories by which he tells us that how there is structural adjustment of judicial activism, which means that how judicial activism, which was earlier there in the Supreme Court, is diminishing when it comes to to matters relating to economic policies. So these are the first three stories, which are basically the Supreme Court judgments or the High Court judgments, which he is talking about as instances where there is submergence of the judicial activism when it comes to economic problems. So first, he takes the example of Bombay High Court's dismissal of a challenge to India's accession to the WTO. Second, he talks about the famous Bhopal gas leak tragedy case, where the Supreme Court could not overshadow the for the American judicial system, and it had to give away the power to the American system itself to decide the quantum of compensation. And in fact, Upendra Bakshi criticizes the fact that Supreme Court even reduced the compensation in this case. So there was submergence of the judicial power of the Indian courts by the Western court of that is of America. The third example he takes is of that how the labor jurisprudence means the cases where there were issues relating to labor laws. So he says that in 2006, a Supreme Court decision did away with all the labor jurisprudence, which was socialist in nature, which was in nature of a welfare for the labor, and the role of judicial activism was, in case of labor laws, was reduced by this 2006 judgment. Fourth, he takes the example of Narmada Dam case, where the Supreme Court granted relief, but the relief came so late that the damage already occurred. The people living nearby already their lands were submerged. So it was of very little help for the common people. The fifth example he takes is of the demolition drive that take place in cities. So he says that because of this globalization, there is demolition of uh, houses and the properties in the urban spaces, denying due process to the common people. So common people are not provided due opportunity of hearing, and their properties, their houses are demolished by the municipal authorities in urban areas. The sixth example he takes is of the harsh treatment which was made by the Supreme Court in the case of Zahira Sheikh in a contempt case, and he compares this case that how Supreme Court was harsh with Zahira Sheikh, but it is not so harsh when it comes to political leaders. He takes the example of union law ministers, the other high-profile cases where the Supreme Court is lenient. So through these six cases, he is trying to bring the change that has been brought in the role of judiciary, which was earlier very active in addressing the issues of marginalized people, the issues of labor class, the issues of common men, and that how this role has submerged or minimized after globalization, and the court do not object much when it comes to problems of economic policy. So when a case relating to economic policy comes, the role of judiciary has diminished or it has submerged. So the broad argument that he is making is that there is change in the role of the judiciary. There is a structural change in the role of judiciary when it comes to problems of economic policy. So, in conclusion, he says that does this access to justice part of the solution or part of the problem? So he says that access to justice in a globalized economy is part of the problem, and we have to answer certain question which he provides in the last segment of his paper. He says that how can we restore the glory of the Supreme Court which it had earlier, and how we can ensure that the national capital does not ride brutal over the rights of the working class. He asks us how to bring democratic and constitutional content into good governance. And he ends up by saying that can we expect that Supreme Court to become again what we call it as the last refuge for the bewildered and oppressed. So this is the main gist of the paper written by Upendra Bakshi sir, where he is criticizing the uh, globalization and the role of judiciary at the same time. So he says that in times of globalization, it is very difficult to maintain the judicial activism that was there before globalization. And he has taken these stories, six stories basically, to highlight upon this issue. Thank you.